Thank you. Thank you very much for arranging this opportunity and for me to be able to stand in front of you to share what I consider to be one of the unknown atrocity of humanity that is still unknown, even though we have a lot of noise in the media, and whether it's the mainstream or social media. And also thank you for the organizers. I take this kind of opportunity to my heart, and I believe it's my obligation as an Uyghur who grown up back home, spent 30 years of my life within that culture and in the country. It's my obligation to share what I know so that we can avoid that kind of atrocities and injustice and all of the associated problem that brings to humans. About a month ago, I was here doing some presentation and introducing Uyghurs. And how many of you were in that presentation? All right. Thank you. Thanks for coming again. I'm not going to bore you with the stuff that I've already told you. What I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about who are Uyghurs and what is happening and why it is happening and what can we do. And then I'd like this to be more of an interactive session where I'm sure all of you have a lot of questions. And I thank you for you being here. That means you care enough to know what is going on, and you care enough to be here to be able to help in a way that you choose to do so. Uyghurs are people who are living in Central Asia for ages. One of the believed to be the origin of all Turkic people, especially the modern-day Turkey. The people in modern-day Turkey is actually migrated from my hometown. That's why the root of our language with the root of Turkish language is almost the same. The divergence of it is for the last few hundred years because of the geopolitical divergence. Our language have branched to a different direction. However, if I spend about a month in Turkey, I have no problem communicating fluently, just using the base words that I use and they use. I don't even have to learn Turkish. Uyghurs are the ancient Central Asian inhabitants who have been living as long as, let's say, Chinese civilization. In China, they claim that they have about 8,000 years of history. Uyghurs have almost as same, not less, about the same history where we've been living alongside with the Chinese as neighbors. Those histories are messy. Sometimes there are wars, there are invasion. We invaded them, they invade us. But nonetheless, we have been living as independent nations since 1863, when Manchu Empire invaded our hometown and started to give us a new name called Xinjiang, which is in Chinese called New Territory. Since then, Uyghurs have never stopped claiming their land and being in their aspiration of being independent. We established republics twice, in 1934 and 1943. However, those republics are short-lived. And because of the Central Asian Great Game, if you're familiar with the Central Asian history, our land has become a part of, as they claim, part of China. And now, if you look at China's literature, if you read history books, most of the literature claims that China, Xinjiang, has been part of China for thousand years, which is an insult to the facts, which is a revisionist history where they can claim because all of the independent thought in China are not allowed, and you cannot state the facts that prior to 1863 it was an independent nation. Even after that, we had independent states. And the real occupation of the Chinese Communist Party started in 1949. And since then, Chinese Communist Party, as in the turmoils that has been involved in the rest of China with the Chinese people, they had their own fair share of turmoils during the Cultural Revolution and Live Forward and whatnot. We went through with them together. Initially, during 1949, there was about 3% of Han Chinese in my homeland, which I call East Turkestan. That is their official statistics, that is by the government. Now, if you look at the Han Chinese population in East Turkestan, there's about 56% of the total population. So within about a half a century, there's about more than half of the population of the indigenous Uyghurs and all the Turkic-speaking people, Kazakh and Kyrgyz included. Han Chinese population migrated there, and they become the majority now. One of the things that I'd like to emphasize is we all know, as a Islamic, Christian, and Judaic tradition, as an Abrahamic religion tradition, we all know we believe in something higher than us. The higher being. There's something higher than us that we aspire to and we believe in. However, in Chinese culture, that does not exist. It never has been. And 1,000 years of that kind of culture started to take roots in the domestic politics of Chinese Communist Party. Today, if you look at the way China claims as a great nation is so-called cultural or civilization state. As we know in the West, in the Eastern culture where, we believed in something higher than us, a lot of countries, if you know the nation states, we have a nation state. There's a nation, nationalities, and there is a state that's surrounding them. However, if you look at China's history, China's civilization, it is a civilization state. And they believe in it strongly to a point because in the 1,000 years of their history, what happened is a lot of different nationalities either invaded China or lived with them. Because of this, the civilization the Chinese people have built over thousands of years, all the other culture has been assimilated into that culture and become Chinese civilization. And they believe that to be the foundation of their country. So The reason why I'm saying this is because in China, if you look at their official claim, they have 56 nationalities. That's what they claim. They still do. However, if you really count now, there are very few distinct nationalities left. One of them is being Uyghur, the other one is Tibet. And other nationalities among the 56 have been civilized. So when I say civilized, the state, the Communist Party see the people who have a distinct culture, language, tradition, they see them as uncivilized because China sees the state as a civilization state. And Chinese people, the Han Chinese people, have been brainwashed since the kindergarten, since the time that they can tell the right from wrong, that this is a civilization. And we have a proud history and a civilization. All the other minorities is uncivilized. We need to integrate them into the Chinese civilization. Because of this kind of mentality, if you look at most, do we have anybody from China here? I really wish they could come and we really have a conversation and talk about it, because at the end of the day, we lived as neighbors, and we are going to live as neighbors, and the problem that we have to solve with them. So as I said, the Chinese people have been brainwashed to a point where when you ask them about Uyghur problem, they either say that whatever the government says is true, they are backward and uncivilized, and we're going to have to civilize them and make them into a Chinese society, or they will either say shows their indifference. But overall, if you talk to most of the Chinese citizens or Han Chinese, most of them believes what government have told them, because they have been positioned, they have been brainwashed to believe in that kind of narrative, because they believe, according to their tradition, the state is like a father, like a parent. They look after their kids, and they believe in that. And we have had this kind of belief in the past, and it has caused humanity as a great disaster. In 1938, when Hitler required everybody to sign a contract of saying that, we have I'm going to do my own domestic nationalistic agenda, but please don't say anything to it, because I'm not going to, just respect me, I'm not going to invade you and whatnot, right? But we know what happened, because the rest of the world just didn't say anything or said nothing because of all this unfairness and injustice, this kind of nationalistic view of state as a father and parent can do the best for its citizens and do whatever they want with it. And what happened is the brainwashing happened, and the war happened, and the Holocaust happened. And what is happening in China right now, I get asked this a lot of questions, like why now? Like why all of a sudden all of the social media, all of the mainstream media talks about Uyghurs? Why now? What did you guys do, right? I'd say it's not a problem of now. It's a problem of, it's been happening since they invaded our land. And that's the culmination because of the power, the economic power that China is gaining around the world, because when empire expands, becomes strong, it really needs to expand. It needs to expand to a point where, China cannot expand the south. If you look at the South China Sea and the sea route, U.S. dominates those places. It's hard for China to go around and do trade and do whatever they wanted. So they started to really expand to the west in the ancient Silk Road, and they tried to build up a One Belt and Road initiative from Beijing all the way to Rome, which is ancient Silk Road. They're trying to revive it because that's something they can control. And they see Uyghurs as an obstacle on the way because there's an unrest. From time to time, we took to streets to demand justice and fairness, and Uyghurs' aspiration to become an independent country has never died. And it's getting even stronger because of all the things that as the Chinese Communist Party is doing. Since 2016, we have seen unprecedented hard-handedness of Chinese government, where up until now, some statistics say there's about 3 million people in concentration camps now. And as a personal story, I have no idea what happened to my family. I couldn't communicate with them. You know, I can talk about all the atrocities, and I'm sure you probably have known from the social media. The one thing kind of worth noting is they have a point system where if you talk to someone overseas, they deduct 10 points from the overall points they're going to give you. And if you got to a point 60, you will be taken to camp because they believe you to have some kind of problem, you know, ideological problem, or some sort of, you know, you're not civilized enough to be a Chinese citizen. So right now, we're in a situation where China is getting stronger. China has been the strongest in its history ever. However, as I see why Uyghur issue is getting a lot of recognition and media is because of the fact that China is getting stronger. When China gets way stronger, it starts to really start affecting the other countries such a way that other countries started to reckon with the force. The way they reckon with the force is to start looking at what kind of problems China have, what it's doing its citizens, and it started to, things become more social, things become more mainstream media. And so as I see, the trend is going to go from where it's going. As China gets a lot stronger, the Uyghur issue is going to get at the center of every country's politics. As it has happened in the Washington, D.C., we had a Uyghur Human Rights Act of 2019 that is passed in the House, and it's about to pass the Senate. The last week I was in the state capitol. There's a joint proposal to pass an even stronger language to condemn China in terms of the human rights atrocities that they're doing to punish the people involved. So, all in all, what I'm saying all of this is because as we have seen in the coronavirus spreading, China's government, one of the things that I've lived 30 years of my life there, and I know how government works. The thing that Chinese government are afraid the most is the facts and the truth. That is the most important thing that Chinese government are afraid of. And they do everything they can to hide it. They do everything they can to discredit it. And so today I'm here to share with you guys so that, you know, you're Muslim or non-Muslim or someone who really cares about fairness and justice, we need to start really telling people around us, in our community, in our workplace, in our school, this kind of injustice and atrocity cannot and should not happen. The first thing you can do is ask UC Davis to stop all kind of cooperation, especially related to political, historical, and social studies cooperation with China. We're taking Chinese money for research, or they're actually giving research grants and that kind of cooperation. At least stop a kind of a principled approach where unless you stop this, we're not going to do it, because of those principles that we have. As a college students, you have the right to demand to go to International Center and tell them what our school are doing. There's 250 schools who signed a declaration of pledge, where in academia they would like to oppose Chinese government's interference in the colleges, universities all around the world. There's about 250 universities signed a declaration last year when I was in DC. I do not see UC Davis on that list. And you have a moral obligation to ask your school to be part of that declaration. I'm not gonna, I've talked a lot about what they have done to us and, you know, to our women and children, and it's just inhumane to repeat, and every time when I wanted to say all of the things, I get a lot kind of emotional. But one thing I really would like to say is, as an Uyghurs who have been in forefront of those atrocities for the last 50 years or so in the Uyghur community, every Uyghur who's living in the West or outside of China has someone, family or relatives, somebody who is in the concentration camp. And they have no way to communicate with them, no way to talk to them. And if you're in history and philosophy, you know, 3,000 years ago, Aristotle said, every man, a woman, has a right to know that their family's loved one whereabouts. But we are deprived of that right. And it's just inhumane. So I'd like to just end with this and open up the questions. Hope, you know, I don't bore with you. If there's one thing to take away from today's talk, I'd like you to take away. There's a student in Hong Kong during the Hong Kong protest. He wrote on his dormitory, and he said, be aware of Chinese government's agenda, or be next, Xinjiang. People who are living in China, they know what the government can do, and they know what the government has been doing. And I really hope to see some Chinese people here to have a conversation, because majority of the places that I go that happen to have a Chinese students in the audience they started to accuse me of lying. They start to accuse me of instigating and whatever the government has said to them, and they said everything is fine. And we're in a state right now, so if we are not aware of those 5,000 years of, 8,000 years of the civilization state can do to people, to its own people, let alone also countries around, the small, weak countries around them, we need to take a notice that as a future generation and future leaders, you have the obligation to really, really start thinking about how can as a young people, what can we do So another Holocaust, much larger scale than what happened, can be prevented. And if everyone, if I can inspire one of you here, to do something extraordinary, just like a little girl did on a TikTok platform, who got millions of followers and made the Uyghur issue front and center among teenagers, some legislature or some politician start paying attention and start having legislation so that we can at least make some noise and help those who cannot help themselves. And I thank you. I appreciate you guys being here, and I hope that at least I've conveyed something. And if you guys have any question, I'll be happy to talk or comments and whatnot. Thank you. Yes.
I was wondering what you also know about like the colonization that's happening in Africa from China. All of the sources I've heard from, I don't super trust, so I'm curious if you have any.
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you look at, we have IMF and IMF, right? And go to countries they lend money to them, and then they come with a huge stack of documents and say you have to follow this convention. You need to treat your people in a humane way. Factories should be this condition, that not. That is IMF 20 years ago in Africa. But African countries, as instead they have their own problem. There's the dictators, and it's not that democratic country. So what happened is China went there and told them, I'll just give you one piece of paper. I'll give you this much. After 20 years, just return this much. I don't care what you do, but we're going to do this and this, that. And now, if you look at the few days ago, I was talking to a Nigerian brother, and he said, it's China now. They have taken over. Government, they lend a lot of money to them. They build factories. They bring a lot of Chinese people to work in the factories. And the dictators is still being dictators because it's good for Chinese government because they're one of them. So their influence is spreading. Even some European countries are caving to it. Like Italy already signed a contract with them and said, okay, Rome is open to you. Come, build, right? I think that question reminded me, when I was at Stanford talking to students, as a lot of Chinese students who elite Chinese students from Beijing University, one of them stood up and told me, she said, so after all of you said, you don't really care about economics. You care about your own culture. That's what the student asked me. And I said, I did not say that. What I said is, development is good because, you need people to be able to live happily the way they want it. But you cannot eliminate a whole group of people just because you don't agree with them, just because you don't see them as civilized. And that's what the elite Chinese students from top universities think. And it's as a reminder, so that, I'm sorry I digress, but that's what reminded me. Yes?
Has the outbreak of coronavirus affected the status of the Uyghur more, or has it caused a little bit of preoccupation?
Yeah, the official statistics from the Chinese website is there's 76 incidents, known incidents in East Turkestan. 76, but I don't buy it. I mean, there is no way for us to verify. They have never allowed any independent study team or to go to verify the numbers. So one of the things worries me about is if you look at the number of concentration camps, the people there, it is going to be a disaster if one of the concentration camps got that virus, and that really horrifies me. A Channel 5 local San Francisco TV station interviewed me the other day and asking me, oh, there's like, that was prior to like the explosion of numbers, right? There was about, like, they say, oh, there's about 100 cases, only 2 of them died, and that was like a month ago. And I told them, I don't buy that. Wait for a month. You probably will see tens of thousands of patients and thousands of people dying. That's what, I mean, I don't know. I just said this because of my experience living there. I mean, you cannot believe what you hear from the government. It's just, you can't believe that. Yes? Sorry, take your time.
Thank you for coming. I've been following this issue for a long time. I just want to say that you're really brave for doing this. My grandparents fled from Nazi Germany, and when the Nazis were rising to power, no one did anything. And as an American, I really want the United States to do something. Just for context, I've been studying Chinese since I was 8 years old. I've been to China many times. My father has worked there for about 13 years. And by the time last year hit, I had more Chinese friends than I had American friends. And I heard what was happening. I knew what was happening. I heard what was happening, and I made a decision that, and I'm studying Chinese here too, and I'm studying human rights too, and I made a decision that I needed to dedicate my life to stopping this. And I just wanted to ask you, if there was, and I know they don't cooperate, and I know it's really hard, but if there was something that, if they were to cave to pressure, if there was just, say in a dream world, if there was something that, if there was something or 3 things or 4 things that the Chinese government could do, or if, say, someone got in power or replaced Xi Jinping, etc., what could they do to make this right? Or what would they be pressured by other countries to do to make this right?
Yeah, I mean, this is, thank you for, one of the things that, I had a lot of Chinese friends. I actually studied with Chinese students together. I lived within one dorm, and great friends, great people. One of the main problem, though, is their collective bargaining power against the government is almost zero. And there are a lot of reasons. One of the main reasons is they brainwashed into that state of thinking. Like, imagine you raised your child in the US, just brainwashing him or her, that let's say if it's a girl, you brainwashed her to say you cannot go into science, right? And then she grown up to believing that she cannot go into science. That's kind of a state, and it's done in a massive scale, as a state scale. So it is to a point where it's dangerous, like from the social spectrum. But to answer your question, one thing that can really, really stop Chinese government is for those in the West, for those who interface with them, start putting your principle first. Start putting basic human rights first and foremost on everything you do. Be consistent and keep doing until the day they realize if we are not open this up and have a dialogue to start thinking about it, there's no business. And if we can do this, if it is hard, but as an individual, if you can do it, let's say if I start doing it and you start doing it and there's enough people start doing it, they have to change. There's no way. We cannot be dictated by the way that they do business. Last year, early this year, they had a human rights convention in Beijing. And they redefined human rights. And there are countries, all the Muslim countries there, a lot of Western countries were there, agreeing what they have defined as a human rights. That is totally wrong. I ask those countries, the citizens of those countries standing up like human rights, it's human rights. There's no Chinese and American style human rights. There is a human rights. It doesn't matter, right? There's a human rights. It is already declared in the Universal Rights of Human Rights Declaration. And you cannot redefine it. They redefined it such that human rights has to cave in the state rights. That's what they have defined. And a lot of countries, Muslim countries, signed on it, which is totally against their faith. I guarantee you. Human rights is human rights. It's a God-given right. God has never said it's a state right. It's just your right. I have given you your right. It is your right. So if we put our principles in everything we do, whenever we do anything with them, that's going to make a huge difference. Yes?
Hi, thank you again for speaking today.
Oh, you're welcome.
My question was, if we wanted to start like an open dialogue or conversation with Chinese students here at UCBS, how do you think we should go about that when they have a certain belief system?
Yeah, so first and foremost, open up a chapter, like Save Uyghurs chapter or whatever, or Save Justice chapter. It doesn't have to be about Uyghurs, like just fairness chapter. Talk to them about fairness. Talk to them about justice. What do they offer to you versus what do we offer to them? And start really having this basic dialogue with them. Hey, look, I know the way you think. I know how this government thinks, but you're here. Let me put myself in your shoes and let you put yourself in my shoes and talk about it. And at least we can come to an agreement about what human rights is, right? And I don't believe people who, either from China or whatnot here, or Chinese people, I have a lot of friends here too. I work with them all the time. I don't believe that they're going to, even being here and seeing all of this, that the free and just, and there's no absolute free and justice society, but relatively U.S. is one of the hope of the humanity, where we have put in check and balances, even though we can debate there's things going on at national level, which I'm not going to get into, but at least this is a country of a hope, a hope that every human has a basic human rights guaranteed. right? So, I mean, started having a chapter, having a dialogue with the Chinese Student Association, and really bring those issues up. I mean, any other questions? Yes.
This is kind of a two-part question. So, first of all, are there any, what organizations outside of China have been most helpful in advocating for Uyghur people? And the second part of the question is, are there any U.S. legislators or Congress people or senators that have been helpful in trying to advocate for this?
Yeah, the first question is, there are a lot of there's Uyghur American Association, you can get in touch with them. There's Uyghur Human Rights Project, you can get in touch with them. You can get in touch with, I have a Uyghur Foundation that I established with some of my friends, and you can get in touch with us. We've been helping in any way, shape, or form that we can. We cannot help directly the people in East Turkestan and Uyghurs, but we can help those who are displaced because of the concentration camps and whatnot. Most of them fled to Turkey, so we can help people there. But for your question, there are organizations in national and local level that you can get in touch with me. I'll give you my card if you're interested in. That's one. And in terms of the second question is, Senator Marco Rubio has been the champion of Uyghur Human Rights Act in the House, and it's already passed. And there's a Senate version is being voted on. Based on what the GovTrack statistics, it says it's going to pass unanimously. And there's also, I have brought some brochure here that what you can do in terms of, the laws and resolution that is in the legislature and being debated on and being voted on. So you can actually talk and call your representatives to support it. So I have this a bill that last week we went to Sacramento. I just knocked on the doors of every assemblyman and woman that I can talk to, and I give them this, joint resolution to ask them to support it. And looks like it's going to pass, which is, gives me hope. So it's got very strong language in terms of some sanction, in terms of some, it has real teeth in it, is what I mean. So. Did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes?
So I don't really understand, what's China's end goal? And, is this just an attempt to justify, other repressive policies? What's their end goal?
If you talk to a Chinese government official, they say their end goal is just to be able to provide the best situation to their people, lift them from poverty and make them happy. That is on paper. But if you look at real ambition of China, the way that they see their state can only be the state that they wish to see is civilize or make the whole China as a civilization state and expand the ideology of civilization to wherever they can reach. For example, the Central Asian states, where the former Soviet Union, after the Soviet Union broke up, there's a lot of Central Asian states were ethnically related to us. They speak Turkish language. However, if you look at Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and all of the Tajikistan, those places, they have already kowtowed and caved into what China government asks. So the point is, they're trying to establish a kind of a dominance. They always quote United States imperialistic dominance. They quote them that, hey, US is doing it, why not us? That's empire expands, and we can expand too. That's their justification. But in the long run, what I meant is, I am more worried about not the geopolitical or this kind of, I'm more worried about what along the way it can do to humanity. Starting starting from their own citizens. You know, if you put 1 billion people in that state of believing that whatever the state says is right, it is a huge time bomb, right? It's a huge time bomb that you can actually do a lot more horrible things. And that's what worries me all the time. And that's what we really, the rest of the world should stand up and start telling, hey, you can't do it. We have done it in the past. We have suffered it. We cannot repeat that again. And that's what I'm more interested in, seeing. Any comments or questions or any place where you guys want me to kind of go into a little bit more detail, I'd be happy to. Sorry, I'll probably be blabbering a bit today because, you know, I had a long day at work and I had to draw. My brother drove me here. Thanks for. So, yes.
So can you clarify, I know there's a misconception that the reason why China is targeting the Uyghurs is because they're Muslim, but it's not really that, right? It's that they're using the Muslim identity part and trying to erase that in order to get to this like greater goal of ethnic cleansing. Can you like deliberate on that a little?
Sure. I came to U.S. in 2000, and after I came to U.S. in about a couple of months' time, I was interviewed by, I think it is NPR, and the host asked me, oh, you're persecuted because you're a Muslim, right? And I said, part of it, but it's not the whole reason. And I try to tell them, look, you know, you don't have to be a Muslim to be prosecuted in China. You can be a Christian to be prosecuted in China, right? You can be someone who, you can be a Falun Gong member to be prosecuted, right? You can be a member of some group that doesn't agree with whatever the government says, bottom line, and you'll be prosecuted. And I was trying to bring this to the attention of the radio host, but he keeps pushing me towards this a religious prosecution, it's a religious problem and whatnot. For Uyghurs, it has never been a religious problem in a strict sense where we have no religious conflict with Chinese people. We're not, and a different sect of a religion is trying to say, hey, mine is right, yours is wrong. That's not the case. Or the problem with the problem of Chinese versus Uyghurs is it's pretty simple. We're independent people. We're being invaded. Our country has been invaded, and we want to live as a free, independent nation. The bottom line is this. However, as it stands right now, the way they have written their history books, the way that they have educated their people, the Han Chinese people. I went to university with the Han Chinese, and one of my close friends are Chinese, and he's at the beginning he's like, oh, yeah, you guys have been part of China thousand years. And I was like, no. I gave him books and this, and I talked to him, and eventually he said, oh, then you should be independent. And I said, yeah, I mean, we should be independent, but you know, the Chinese government and the way it's structured doesn't work that way. So the point is, the problem is right now, because of the geopolitical game after the Second World War, during the Yalta Conference, our fate was decided at that conference between Stalin, Churchill, and Chairman Mao. And they just sit down on the table while, I don't know what we're doing, but you know, they said, oh, okay, this East Turkestan belongs to you, the West Turkestan belongs to Soviet Union, and let's just let the Mongolia break up Inner and Outer Mongolia, and Outer Mongolia become independent country, and the Inner Mongolia, okay, we'll just leave you to Chinese. So that's how the borders are drawn at that time. And that is totally wrong, right? I mean, that's what Uyghur people have a legitimate reason to claim back their country. But to your question of it's a religion versus, there's one thing I'd like you guys to take away is, if you do not think, behave like Chinese, they will make you think, behave like Chinese until they are able to do so. That's crux of the problem. Because Uyghurs have been clinging to their own culture. They've been clinging to their own religion. And Chinese government does not want that. And we have some people among Uyghur community, they're changed their names into Chinese names. They speak Chinese language. They become totally Chinese, and they're good. They're happy. They brainwash into the mainstream Chinese society. Until a couple of years ago, they even started to round them up, put them in concentration camp because they still don't believe them, because they've been living and interacting with Uyghurs because they accuse them being double-faced. And I have no idea what the crime is, because one of the guy, for example, who is the leader of Chinese Communist Party, Uyghur guy, who have been rising young politician, and he actually got, I think he got death sentence, right? I believe. So he was like, he's changed his name into Chinese. He's one of the Chinese politician of the year on the Chinese, like Times equivalent to Times magazine, like Time Person of the Year kind of person. But he's happened to be ethnic Uyghur anyway. I mean, looks Uyghur. So the point is, until you are civilized, they're going to civilize you. And they do whatever they can to do so.
Just add on to that, religious issues are more pronounced because that's one of the factors that ties Uyghur people together strongly because of religion, and because that's big. Religion being a step, so keeping them distinct from Chinese, because in the way you marry, in a way, that's one of the things that people stay within their religions. The people stay, and also the way we eat, that's a strong factor to keep Uyghurs as Uyghurs, culturally and also religiously. That's just an add-on, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, brother.
And definitely, the way they put in people in concentration camp is just having a beard, having a whale. So just having a very, very Islamic name. So that will be a good reason for them to think that these people are extremists, which is ridiculous.
So that's very strong. That's a great point. Thanks, brother. I mean, think about it. You can't even say Assalamu alaikum, let alone read the Quran and pray. You can't say that. Yes?
So does this issue also affect a lot of the non-Chinese Muslims?
Yeah. They're taking a divide and conquer approach, and it's going to come to them. Trust me. I went to school in Xi'an, which is a lot of Han Chinese Muslim there. I had a lot of friends whom I, prayed together and whatnot. And they're relatively free compared to what I know of Uyghurs, but now they're starting to affect them. Another anecdote just reminded me that since I came to US in 2000, we used to have demonstrations in front of Chinese consulate every time when some commemoration day comes up. I used to see only some Tibetan Uyghurs, but now I see all the ethnic people surrounding China, including Vietnamese, Filipinos, Hong Kong. So whatever especially the South China Sea part, Japanese, right? They're started to, even one of the Vietnamese friend that I had that told me, China has already taken over Vietnamese government. I don't know. It's just what he said, but that's how he feels. But now I'm seeing more and more people protesting against China because that imperialist, that kind of expansionist is happening. And there's a reason for that. The reason is Of course, it's economic reason, they would say, but I see it differently because from history I know, in 600 AD, our ancestors have written on a stone a wise words we have been heedless. Do not let those coming to you and spread rumor among the best of you, so that the best of you fight among each other. And then when you become weak, you become one of them. And that thing happens today too. I mean, in 1949, there's about 6%, right? Now it's 56. So even if we have a national democratic election, we're going to lose, right? But it's not going to help us. What's going to help us? The mindset and the way that you cannot brainwash people to believe in a kind of Nazi-style ideology. That's what we should be really aware of. Yeah.
Since the 2022 Winter Olympics are coming up in Beijing, and that is such like an international glory project for the Chinese government, basically. I've seen a lot of Uyghur people talk about the no rights, no games movement. I'm not sure if you've been involved or have heard much about that, but if you could expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, remember when there was an Olympic Games, we were out in front and center in terms of asking countries to boycott, and we're going to do that. We will take every opportunity to make our voices heard. However, politics is politics, and I'm not a politician, but what we can do as a Uyghur diaspora and communities and organization, we really need to get to the spirit of the game and really make an association in terms of what the game stands for and what they've been doing it, and we really need to start highlighting. You'll probably see more articles on newspapers and national newspapers and social media and whatnot. So the point is, you guys heard it. You guys are interested enough to know what's going on, and I know it is far from us. It does not affect directly. But think about it. How about your kids? How about future generation? How about my grandkids? Or how about my creator? When I go back to my creator, what am I going to tell him? Right? What did I do? I gave you your life. What did I do? Every one of you should be able to answer that question. I think if we can convert enough people mentally think like that, I'm hopeful. Whatever the evil, evil can take over the entire room. It takes us one little tiny candle to lit the entire room, right? It's like, if I can affect one of you to say, hey, I need to start doing something with the gift of life that I have, right? I mean, that's the best we can do. That's the best that I can ask people to do. I mean, you can do active. 20 years I've been activist. But what did I see as a result of it? Not much. But one of the best results that I have seen is the people who I have spoken to, my colleagues, my coworkers, my classmates, people that I talk to in conferences, professionally or individually. I have huge amount of people that write to me and said how it changed their life. That's why I come to places like this, open up what I can offer, and hope to see one of you guys in the future and say, hey, just because of that day, that talk, that's what I'm doing, right? Any other question? If not, yes.
Another thing I just wanted to bring up is, I just struck me. Like a decade ago, I was a student at you guys, the universities, and I know you guys have a lot of work, a lot of pressure at school. It wasn't easy. Thank you for all coming here. And I remember we were on the seniors, we finished up our thesis, trying to get out of school, finding a job. And I had a lot of classmates, including me, we were under pressure, finding a job. And I even heard my classmates saying, oh, I can't find a job, I should spend my years in temple meditating so I could have a better mentality. But so it's not going to be easy out there, but make something besides just graduating, looking for jobs, which is very normal, but make something larger than life as one of the goals. Because either way, you guys are going to end up somewhere doing something, because we all created to have to be somebody in the society. So every one of us has their own place at some point in the future. So if you make something larger than life, one of the goals, then then years pass by and you'll think back that things that you were about life was, it's actually it's trivial. But if you, the things that this is a universal thing, that the human rights, universal justice, regardless of religion, these are the right thing for every human in the future. So make it one of your goals, starting from that. So that the rest of the things will fall into place. So, and then I just wanted to mention this. Thank you.
I have some flyers who are you guys interested in what you can immediately do. There are some specific actions that you can do to help. And I'm going to leave it here, or you can come and take it from me. And again, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my blabbering. And I hope I've touched at least one people's heart to a point where I'm going to do some change in you guys' life. Thank you.